I made a video on how modern Pokemon games suck,
Your video sucks and you sound like a whiny man-child.
got a lot of views,
Like listening to an old fuck telling those damn kids Evering was better in the old days.
got a lot of great feedback,
More like your video sucks.
and a lot of likes. But there was one game I barely mentioned in the video, and it was the 2018 Pokemon game Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, or Pokemon PD for short. Now you might expect me to bash on these games like I did with Sword and Shield.
Truth is,
I actually really like Pokemon PV. And it actually might be the best modern Pokemon game, and actually better than Pokemon Fire Red.
what?
기름,
Before you lift your pitchforks, hunt me down and then burn me on a stake. Just hear me out. I'll try to explain my case best as possible, and then you can judge. Yes, I know this game's a cheap cash grab by the Pokemon Company and Game Freak to make another quick buck by exploiting the success of Pokemon Go. Yes, I know this is another nostalgia banking trip to Generation 1 Pokemon, sort of like how the Star Wars sequel trilogy kept relying on planet killing devices. I acknowledge all of this, but to be brutally honest, I really enjoyed these games, and I had way more fun playing this than Pokemon Sword and Shield. I'll explain to you viewers why I actually really like these games. They aren't perfect, but here's why it's actually pretty okay. Part 0. I omit these problems. Before I praise the games, let me rant on some of the problems it has. Don't worry, this will be brief. First, the controls. Why is there no Pro Controller support? I know they have to make money off the stupid Pokeball Shake controller, but the game still supports regular Joy-Cons. Game Freak being Game Freak made it so that you can only play the game with one pair of Joy-Con at a time, which makes it super awkward to play as an adult. I feel like I'm fidgeting around with a TV remote. You can play like a normal regular game on handheld mode on the Switch, so I suggest you play with that mode. Second, the graphics. It looks like a 3DS game upscaled, which is a major disappointment for the first console Pokemon game. And the battle animation is a bit crappy.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
Pokemon Sword and Shield actually improved from this with better shading, but there are some actual positive sides to this style of graphics, which I'll mention later in the video. Third, the post-game. In this game, they don't have the Sebi Islands like they did in Fire Red and Leaf Green, which is a shame. Instead, the only story for you to do after the game is catching Mewtwo. They also added in this system called Master Trainers, where you have to beat 150 Pokemon trainers that have each one of the 150 Pokemon. But it's tedious as hell because you have to fight a Pokemon with the same Pokemon, so attacks are usually going to be not effective with each other, making battles drawn out. Fuck Master Trainers in my opinion, they should have brought back the Sebi Islands. Fourth, the wild Pokemon catching. I'm actually iffy on this one. Instead of traditional wild Pokemon catching, the catching is in real time and is very similar to the mobile game Pokemon Go. I actually do like it because it isn't random button mashing when catching a Pokemon now, but I do understand some people not like it. It's not for everyone, so I think I should mention it here. Now there is one negative aspect everyone says about the game that I actually think makes the game better, and that is Part 1. Quality over quantity. This seems like a minor point now after the Dexit crisis of Pokemon Sword and Shield, but the game was controversial when it came out because it had only 150 original Pokemon. When I first heard the news about this, I thought it was just another case of Game Freak being apathetic or lackadaisical. But after playing the game, and after playing Sword and Shield, I think it helps the game. Here's why. First, the sizes. One of the problems with the 3DS game was that the actual size of Pokemon were not in scale in battles. So there was a moment that made me go hysterical in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Finally, in this game, every Pokemon size are actually all different and unique. I love how giant Pokemon like Gyarados and Onix look, and how little some Pokemon look. Also, I thought Haunter was the size of a human face, but in this game, Jesus, that is terrifying and I love it. Second, they brought back one feature that everyone was begging for years, and that was following Pokemon in the overworld, which was in one of the best Pokemon games, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Everyone whined about it when it wasn't in the Gen 5 games, and now they finally brought it back, but this time with an upgrade. In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, every Pokemon just simply followed you around because they were sprites. But now every 150 Pokemon is animated in full 3D. Look at how Venusaur jumps around like a frog. I never knew Venusaur was inspired by frogs. Some you can even ride on, and all rideable Pokemon is unique as well. Onix, Snorlax, Rapidash, Haunter all have different and unique riding animation and speeds. These kind of little details help make the Pokemon feel more alive than it has ever before, and I think this wouldn't have been possible for Game Freak to accomplish if there were 700 Pokemon instead of 150. So ironically, cutting down the Pokemon and focusing on the few to make them feel more alive, I actually really dig that. This is a stark difference from Sword and Shield, where even though they cut down the Pokemon because either they didn't have time or they were lethargic, all the Pokemon were the same size in battles, just like the 3DS games. Detail and making the Pokemon feel more alive are the two things modern Pokemon games are severely lacking, and I think this game achieves that unlike Sword and Shield. Of course, in a perfect world, a game with all 800 Pokemon with this level of detail will be perfect, but that is expecting too much out of Game Freak considering their track record for being inattentive. Inattentive? What? How do you pronounce this? Part 2. Canny 3D World. Back in my previous video, I complained about how the games tried to make a fully realistic environment and it started to make the games feel more fake and unreal. This was because immersion breaks every time you hit a fence wall in a realistically shaped environment. We'll see empty streets with barely anyone in a realistic looking city, or giant open areas with nothing happening and nothing to do, being more empty than my personal wallet. I argued Pokemon should rather follow a style that is exaggerated or unrealistic, and make a small scale like 2019's Link's Awakening. And now I think about it, we got that kind of style in a Pokemon game with this game. Because the map is based off right off an 8-bit video game, most of the environment feels very cramped and small. However, because of this, it doesn't feel like dead empty open spaces. Also, they made it so that all the characters are short and small and don't have proportions of a real human. They look like small amiibos or Funko Pops running around in a toy-like environment. So somehow the characters feel more alive than Sword and Shield. It's less jarring to see people swivel around like they're in 2D, because the world feels a bit 2D even though it's in 3D. Meanwhile, in Sword and Shield... Also, unlike previous games, Pokemon run around in the field instead of random encounters in the grass. This is a mechanic in the game that I thought all future Pokemon should go with in the future, and thank God they did just that with Pokemon Sword and Shield, so kudos to Game Freak for that. But in Sword and Shield, all the Pokemon just stand around in giant open areas doing nothing. It's super distracting and again, broke immersion. However, in this game, since all the environment is small and feels like an 8-bit game, it is less distracting to see Pokemon just stand around and walk around aimlessly. I guess my point is, unless Game Freak is willing to put the effort in to make the world feel alive and very interactive like Breath of the Wild, don't go for big open areas. It feels empty, dead, and fake. It's like when a small budget movie shows off big open CG environments, but you can tell they filmed it in a small room in front of a green screen. Go for small environments like this game. Don't bite off more than you can chew, Game Freak, is my conclusion here. Part 3. Adding character to a classic. I'll stop dogging on Sword and Shield just for now because I said in the intro that this game might actually be better than Fire Red and Leaf Green, so let me explain myself here. What's so ironic about this game is that it's the third remake of a classic game. Third. And if you count the Gen 2 and the remakes, we have seen this goddamn Kanto region 6 times!
This guy is mad. He's not human.
The Kanto region keeps coming back when you think it's dead. But this time, I actually think they made the Kanto region really refreshing, and it's because they added so much detail and love to the world and the characters as well. Fire Red and Leaf Green in the end was just Pokemon Red and Blue running on Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire's engine, and also minus the bugs. Almost all of the story and dialogue is exactly the same beat by beat, and there is really no deviation except the Sebi Islands in the post-game. In this game, it's almost the same story as the original Gen 1 games, but this time it feels like it got an upgrade. We now get more character moments like gym leaders and Elite Fours coming out of their homes to say hello, and it's a fun addition to the games. My favorite is when Lorelei appears in Route 10 to save the player from some rocket runs. She feels less like a sprite waiting in a room to be talked to cause a Pokemon battle. I also appreciate the neat fan service too. Instead of just Giovanni, we got Rocket Admin Archer in the game, who first appeared in Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Hey, another shout out to one of the best Pokemon games. His inclusion makes Team Rocket feel less like a generic group of clone troopers run by an Italian man and a lovey-dovey couple, and I wish we got something like this in Fire Red and Leaf Green. Yeah, I know he sort of technically appears, but he was just a bland no-name NPC in that game. Also, Mina appears, also known as Miss Come Up With a Trial. which makes the game feel more connected to the other games in the series. And even though we got a Mew main character and rivals, we still have Pokemon Trainer Red, Blue, and Green as memorable NPCs. I especially like how they gave Green a personality similar to how she is in the manga. Also, all the gym leaders. This game you can rebattle every gym leader with higher level Pokemon. There was no such thing in Fire Red and Leaf Green, and believe it or not, this is the first game since X and Y to bring that feature back. A lot of people say this game is Baby's first Pokemon game, and that it was geared for casual players. But these kind of moments pleased longtime hardcore fans like me, and I appreciate that. But to answer the question, do I really think this game is better than Fire Red and Leaf Green? Think of it this way. Pokemon Red and Blue is a really nice plate of burgers cooked by the best chef in the world. Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green is another plate of the same burger, cooked the same way as the recipe, but this time with some Coke and a side dish called the Sevi Islands as a set menu. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee is like another plate of the same burger, but with some Mew extra tasty sauce called Mew Mechanics and Full HD. But there is no french fries, it's just the burger. Whether you prefer a set menu or a singular Mew sauce burger but without french fries is personal preference in my opinion. But I do like the Mew sauce burger since I like trying out new but familiar things. Meanwhile, Pokemon Sword and Shield is a rushed burger where the veggies are rotten and the steak is uncooked.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jesus.
Part 4. The strengths of being a remake. The final reason why I think this game is pretty good is because, well, at its foundation, it is based off of a masterpiece that is called Pokemon Red and Blue. And that's the same reason why I think Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire was the best 3DS Pokemon game, since they were remakes of classic games, and that is also why I'm a bit hopeful towards the inevitable Gen 4 remakes. That is because, unless they start taking out parts of the original game, which will make me super mad by the way if they do, the map design will still be good, since it's based off of a really good old classic game. No corners feel cut unlike the other games. As an example of this, in this game, they didn't chicken out with giant massive maze-like dungeon hellholes such as Mount Moon or Pokemon Mansion or Silph Co. These places are still fun to explore unlike... How is it possible that an exact replica of a map of a game that ran on a game console that had the power of a TI-84 is somehow better than a game made in the late 2010s? Explain yourself, Game Freak.
Stop it.
To conclude, what can Game Freak learn about this game? I want to express my wishes for the future of this series, because even though this game is a rehash of a 2-decade-old game, it showed me there was still future potential to the series. They should just add more effort and time into making the games, so they can polish things out without cutting corners. I will also throw this out though. Sword and Shield of course had more thought into the world building, since they had to come up with a Mew region, characters, and Pokemon. This game probably didn't require a lot of imagination since it's a remake, but this game, it didn't feel like corners were cut. So I just want a marriage of the best of both worlds in the next game. The next game, can we please put effort into making the Pokemon feel more alive by putting in detail like this game? But please make the world fresh and Mew like Sword and Shield. Please no more cutting corners. And that's all I have to say, Game Freak.
You can't rush art.
What's good about the DLC of Sword and Shield is that it gave Game Freak a gap year between releases. So hopefully the eventual Diamond and Pearl remakes or Let's Go Johto or whatever is good. Will there be all Pokemon in that game? And have the Battle Frontier? And have characters from Pokemon Platinum though? Yes.